Are you looking for an easy breakfast treat that comes together in a matter of minutes? Why not try these pumpkin scones? They're full of delicious warm spices like ginger and cinnamon and nutmeg and everybody's favorite, a little bit of pumpkin. That was 2 cups of all-purpose flour. To that, add 1/3 cup of sugar. So they're lightly sweet, which is nice. 2 teaspoons of baking powder to give them lightness and airiness. 3/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, as well as 3/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Those are your classic pumpkin pie spices, which is what makes things taste extra pumpkin-y, because pumpkin actually has a pretty mild flavor. 1/2 teaspoon of grated fresh nutmeg. I am eyeballing this, as you can see. But feel free to measure because nutmeg does have a pretty strong flavor and you don't want it to be too overwhelming. So you should measure, even though I didn't. 3/4 teaspoon of coarse salt, and whisk those dry ingredients together. You want to have your oven preheated to 375 degrees. Scones, like biscuits, cook at a pretty high temperature. For your butter component, which scones generally have, I have 1 stick of butter and it's frozen, and to get it into small pieces so that it combines really nicely into the dry ingredients, I'm going to grate it. This is a really great method that you can use for scones, you can use it for biscuits, you can use it for pie crusts. Especially this is great when you're doing it by hand. Often our recipes in the magazine will call for using food processor for pie crusts, but this is a really nice way to get the butter broken down easily. You don't have to worry about if it's the right size because it is pre-designed by grating to be the right size. And then once it's grated, you don't even need to work it in much more. You just stir it right into your dry ingredient mixture. It's kind of cool. Also grated butter, if I'm going to show it to you because it's so cute, but if you grate your butter frozen like this and then put it into little butter dishes, wouldn't that be cute to serve on your table with like toast or whatever? I don't know, I've never done it, but all of a sudden I was looking at it and I was like, that's super cute. This is how ideas come to me, people. Make sure you get all your butter. Transfer the butter to the bowl with the dry ingredients. And then you can just sort of stir it in with your fingers if you want to, and then it's already broken down. You know, we usually say texture of coarse crumbs or whatever, and this is already the same texture as coarse crumbs. Pumpkin is 1/3 cup, and you can use canned pumpkin, you can cook pumpkin and then puree it and then measure it. If you do that, you can make, a big bunch and freeze some of it, and then you have pumpkin all year round. But we use canned pumpkin all the time and think it's a great product. This is 2 tablespoons of heavy cream and 1 large egg. Whisk together. You want it to be pretty smooth, and then you can add that to your dry ingredients. Everything just went flying. Everybody's covered with pumpkin. Stir together, or you can use your hands, or you can use a spoon. I always use a fork when I'm making a scone or a biscuit, but that's just me. I don't know why. No real reason. I think it's just so that it doesn't overwork. I give in. I'm using my hands. You want to make sure that all of your dry ingredients are hydrated by the pumpkin and the cream and the egg. So everything needs to be in contact with that at some point without overworking it. And you don't need it to become a big lump, but you do want all of the flour to get moistened by these ingredients. Okay, it's coming together into a ball. Right now I'm going to transfer it to my baking pan. It's just a parchment-lined rimmed baking sheet, and you can form it right into a disc right on here. Knead it until it fully comes together without overworking it. I know that seems like maybe they're at odds with each other, but they're not. Just want it to hold together. And even if there appear to be some little cracks and stuff, when it bakes up, it will bake together. So you really do want to be careful at this point because you want your scones to be tender when they're baked, and if you overwork it, it could end up tough. Then you want to form it into about a 6-inch disc. It should be about an inch thick, I would say. These are pretty thick scones and they'll puff up pretty dramatically in the oven. cut that disc into 8 pieces. I usually cut it in half and then cut the half into 4. Then separate them. You can brush it ahead of time. I'm gonna brush it with cream. I could have brushed it before I cut it. I'm just gonna brush them now. Just the tops. This helps get them even more golden brown. They are going to have a delicious maple glaze, so that's going to be an added deliciousness factor, but this makes them really beautiful on top. And if you weren't going to make the glaze, you could brush these with cream and then just sprinkle them with sugar, and that would also be really, really nice. These need to bake until they're golden brown and cooked through. That should take about 20 minutes. Now, if you want to make a glaze, try a maple glaze because that's what's delicious with pumpkin. This is a half a cup of confectioner's sugar, 1 tablespoon of melted butter, and 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. I'm not going to add all of it because sometimes, depending on how you measure your sugar, you need either more or less. So I always like to start out with less than the recipe says and then add. It also gets a pinch of salt. Definitely needs that. You want it to be like the texture of thick honey. This is smooth, but it's still a little bit thick, so you can add a little bit more maple syrup, like a teaspoon or so at a time. You can also use water, but maple syrup obviously has way more flavor, so don't use water if you can use maple syrup. You want your mixture thick enough that it'll stick to your scone and not run all over the place, but not so thick that you need to spread it on. That's more like a frosting, isn't it? This looks good to me. Dip the top in, let the excess drip back in, and then let it set on the wire rack that you let the scones cool on. Oh, did I mention the scones should be cool? These have been cooling. Usually it takes about an hour. If your scones are a little bit warm, which sometimes they are, your glaze will sort of absorb in and get a little bit more clear, which is sometimes a nice thing too. So you can do it when they're slightly warm. I wouldn't do them directly out of the oven. And then you should let them set, but you know, I want to give this a try just to make sure it's good. It's delicious. That maple glaze is the perfect accompaniment to this pumpkin scone. Give it a try. If you like recipes like this and you want more, make sure to click like and subscribe because we have plenty more where this came from.